Hey Vignesh, welcome to the show. Ask anything
Hey,
about Pallavas.
thank you very much.
And we're going to basically keep this as a sequence to try and keep the interest of what the particular reader is going to be asking about. But I thought it would be good to equip them with more information, trying to get into your head as a author as to what you were thinking through when you were basically writing these. So this is
Sure.
pretty much on the first of the chapters that you've written. So it's like
Mhm,
beginning, Pallavas, who are they? Why do
mhm,
we care? So,
mhm.
what exactly did you basically start with in terms of information that you basically started collecting to talk about where do you want to begin as far as the Pallavas are concerned? Any thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
uh, superb question. Usually what happens is when one goes for researching about a particular story behind a dynasty, they always tend to go for the founder of the Pallavas or the founder of a particular dynasty. But you see, this is where the Pallavas are slightly different because when it comes to their origin, it's largely unknown. So you go for when their imperial age began, as in when they were at the zenith of their power, or when they were still ascending to where they would eventually come to dominate the southern peninsula of India. So when it comes to the Pallavas, that tends to actually start with the king who was the focal point of their history, is King Mahendra Varman the first. Now, what is amazing about this king is he is not only a temple builder, but he also practically laid the foundation of their great civilization. Just like how he raised temples from cutting and chiseling out the bedrock of granite, which is like super hard to crack. Just like that, he also chiseled and finely carved the foundation of this empire so that his legacy could be built upon by his descendants. So when it came to actually researching on the Pallavas, as in who are they, I believe they are, in one word, Mahendravarman's inheritors.
Oh, wow. So, what you're saying is you start in the middle and then work your way
Exactly.
back. So,
Exactly.
in terms of the research that you basically started on, I understand that you went back to, I think, the ASI related classics from Neelkanta Shastri and those particular books. So, how far in terms of the ADs or so you spoke about Mahendravarman. So, we are talking about
Yeah.
the 7th century to maybe the early 8th century. So, how many centuries back did you need to work back for getting your origins? And what was the sources available for you?
Good question. See, when it comes to the Pallavas, people usually would go for, I don't know, say a millennia ago, but for Mahendra Varman or for his descendants, I would have to go 1,300 years into the past.
Wow.
And when it comes to finding resources or source materials on something that old, I would say it's a bit tricky because of the number of theories that arise as to who Mahendra Varman was, or where he originated from, or where his ancestors came from. See, Mahendra Varman made his records pretty clear. So we do know where Mahendra Varman possibly comes from. But when it comes to his ancestors, you would have to depend on numerous theorists, as in historians like uh, Nilakanta
Neelkanta
Shastri
Shastri.
are very clear on where the Pallavas ruled, but even he is not able to provide conclusive evidence as to where they originated from. So we would have to depend on not only ASI sources, but also several British authors and historians who have their own varying theories on who the Pallavas were. Like some say the Pallavas belong to the south, whereas some say the Pallavas were northern invaders, and some come up with this great theory that that Pallavas are not Indians at all.
Oh, wow. That possibly that suited their narrative to their particular part of history. And unless we write history for our own rulers, this is something which is not going to be seen. So another piece that I remember you spoke to me about was the rock cut temples, which possibly was the origin and predecessors to building the huge structures that they did in Kanchipuram. So would you think, did you get any edicts or any particular stone carvings which went back to the rock cut temples, which also provided any source?
Absolutely. One particular rock cut structure which kind of shows the lineage of Pallavas in motion in front of us, I would say, is the Pancharathas of Mahabalipuram.
Oh, wow.
It's called Mamalapuram. You see, this has five distinctive types of architecture, all in one place. And the amazing thing is, historians believe that these five structures were built or were carved in five different ages, or in like some say that Mahendra Varman like initiated this grand project, and it was completed by his descendant almost 150 years ago by a great king named Rajasimha. So you see, you are seeing 150 years of architectural evolution in front of you in just one structure. I would say the Pancharathas describes it beautifully.
Oh, wow. So that would be the structure. And what about this particular structure which you had used in your book to start talking about the pieces? This, I think, was more towards what, the 6th century, 7th century?
Absolutely. I mentioned the great Rajasimha. If you see one of the Pancharathas which he is known to have carved out or commissioned is the Dharmaraja Ratha. And if you see the Dharmaraja Ratha and this grand structure, which is called the Kailasanatha Temple of Kanchipuram, you will see their superstructure is strikingly similar. It's just like as if you are seeing the main structure on a grander scale.
Okay.
So when it comes to scale and proportionality, nothing can compare to Rajasthan.
Okay, so let's get back to the origin of where the particular Pallavas came from. So the first of the prominent structures was more like, I think it was North Telangana, I would say north of Tamil Nadu, around the Telangana coast. So do you think some of them would have an attribution that the Pallavas were original Telugu speaking and then came on to rule most of the Tamil Nadu, I mean present day Tamil Nadu part? Is there any credence to that?
I would say, yeah, there is quite a lot of credibility to that theory, because I would say there's a major consensus on that. The Pallavas were probably Andhrites. They belonged to what one would call modern day Andhra, and they made their way to the south until they hit Kanchipuram and eventually made it their capital. They were initially, they believe, were feudatories of the southern Satavahanas, and the Satavahanas were effectively a Deccan-based dynasty. So being feudatories of a Deccan-based dynasty, I would say it would lead quite a lot of credibility to them originally being Andhrites and eventually becoming Tamil kings.
Okay, great. So what we'll do is in the next of the series, when we start exploring, we'll start going by each chapter. And I'm very curious to find out, especially when you have written on the back page, saying that in the 7th century, where the Pallavas dynasty of Kannauj held sway over North India and the rule of Harshavardhan, the south was pretty much belonging to what these Pallavas would be. So I want to basically probe into your head into what are the things that you identified. What is the big takeaway that you would think that Pallava related pieces would basically talk about when we are literally exploring more about your book? Give me that one or two takeaways that I should be looking at.
Well, one thing that I would like to say is the Pallavas were very great builders of architecture. They were effectively a civilization building dynasty. So I think it is time they get their rightful place in Indian history that is equal to the Mughals of India, to the Mauryans of India, to the Guptas of India. I believe they held an equal place of great importance, and their contribution cannot be denounced that way.
So for that matter, if you look at the tenure of the Mughals was more like 1565, getting into 1707, that doesn't take anything more than 250 years. And I think in your book, you've spoken about Pallavas being there between what, 300 to 900? Is that something like, is that a fair duration of time?
Again, like I said, what we know about the Pallavas is only their imperial age. Their origin is still unknown. And if one has to take from their origin to how long they were, I would say their legacy outlasts what the Mughals gave us. I mean, 1,300 years ago compared to 600 years ago, yeah, it's a bit unfair to compare, isn't it?
So what I would think is maybe in your book too, you'll possibly take it a bit further to explore that. Why don't we do this? So we'll pause here in terms of the way the first chapter is unfolded. And as we delve into the next of these chapters, I'll start probing into the pieces that you have written for the chapter 2. So thank you so much for sharing this particular input. What we'll do is we'll come back for the second part of this particular series, which I think we're going to do about 35 of them, and then we'll talk more and explore more about it. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts. Thank you.